The blood on his shirt had dried to a rust color by the time Eleanor Eaton found him lying face down in the scrub grass, his horse grazing nervously a few yards away. She had been traveling through this valley in Arizona territory for 2 days now, her wagon loaded with what little remained of her life in Kansas. And this was the first human being she had encountered since leaving the last settlement. Eleanor pulled her wagon to a halt and climbed down carefully, her hand instinctively moving to the rifle she kept beside the driver's seat. The year was 1883, and a woman alone in this territory learned quickly to be cautious. The man groaned when she approached, which told her he was still alive. That was something, at least. Eleanor knelt beside him, her practical gray skirts pooling in the dust, and carefully turned him over. He was young, perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair matted with sweat and blood from a wound on his temple. His face was handsome in a rugged way, with strong features that spoke of determination even in unconsciousness. A second wound, this one more serious, stained his side where a bullet had torn through his shirt. "Sir," Eleanor said firmly, touching his shoulder, "can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered, revealing eyes the color of storm clouds. They focused on her with difficulty. "Water," he managed, his voice barely a whisper. Eleanor hurried back to her wagon and retrieved her canteen. She was 22 years old, a widow of 3 months, and she had learned during her husband's final illness how to tend to the wounded and dying. This man was neither dying nor beyond help, but he would be if she left him here. She lifted his head gently and let him drink, watching as some color returned to his pale face. "What happened to you?" she asked. "Ambush," he said, his words slurred. "3 men wanted my land." He tried to sit up and fell back with a gasp of pain. "Have to get home, my ranch." "You are in no condition to go anywhere except into the back of my wagon," Eleanor said practically. "Where is this ranch of yours?" "East, 5 miles. His eyes tried to focus on her face. "Who are you?" "Someone who cannot leave an injured man to die in the wilderness," she replied. "Can you stand if I help you?" Getting him into the wagon proved to be an exhausting ordeal. He was tall, well over 6 feet and solidly built. Eleanor was not a small woman herself, standing 5 feet 7 inches, but his weight nearly overwhelmed her. By the time she had him settled on blankets in the wagon bed, both of them were breathing hard and she could see fresh blood seeping through his shirt. "Your name," she said, climbing up beside him with her medical supplies. "I should know what to call you." "Owen Jamison," he said through gritted teeth as she began to examine his wounds. "I own this valley, all of it." "Well, Mr. Jamison, I am Eleanor Eaton, and I am going to need to remove your shirt to properly tend this wound. The bullet is still in there." His eyes met hers, and despite his pain, she saw a flicker of something that might have been amusement. "Are you a doctor, Miss Eaton?" "Mrs.," she corrected automatically. "And no, but I nursed my husband through consumption for 6 months before he passed. I know how to extract a bullet and clean a wound. Now hold still." The work was difficult and unpleasant. Owen passed out halfway through, which was a mercy for both of them. Eleanor worked with steady hands, using the skills she had learned from the doctor who had attended her husband. The bullet had lodged itself below his ribs, missing anything vital by what seemed like divine providence. She extracted it carefully, cleaned the wound with whiskey that made him jerk even in unconsciousness, and bandaged him with strips torn from one of her spare petticoats. By the time she finished, the sun was lowering toward the horizon, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber. Eleanor looked around at the landscape that Owen Jamison claimed to own. It was beautiful in a harsh way, with distant mountains rising against the sky and the valley floor covered in sage and scrub. She could see cattle in the distance, which explained his claim of ownership. She could not stay here in the open with an unconscious man and night approaching. Eleanor climbed back to the driver's seat, caught Owen's horse, and tied it to the back of her wagon. Then she set off in the direction he had indicated, hoping she would find this ranch of his before darkness fell completely. The ranch house appeared as the last light was fading from the sky. It was larger than she had expected, a solid structure of wood and stone with several outbuildings and a barn. As she approached, two men emerged from the barn, rifles at the ready. They lowered their weapons when they saw her, but their expressions remained wary. "Who are you?" the older of the two demanded. He was perhaps 40, with graying hair and a weathered face. "Eleanor Eaton. I found Mr. Jamison shot and wounded about 5 miles west of here. He is in the back of my wagon and needs to be moved inside immediately." The transformation in both men was instant. They rushed to the wagon, and Eleanor heard their exclamations of alarm when they saw their employer's condition. "Is he alive?" the younger man asked, his voice tight with worry. "Yes, and I have removed the bullet and cleaned the wounds, but he needs rest and careful watching." "Where can we take him?" They carried Owen into the house to a bedroom on the first floor. Eleanor followed, directing them to lay him on the bed. The room was simply furnished but clean, with curtains at the windows and a solid oak dresser against one wall. "I am Hank Porter," the older man said once they had Owen settled. "This here is Billy Chen. We work for Mr. Jamison. Has been just the three of us running this place since his father passed last year." "Well, Mr. Porter, Mr. Chen, your employer has been shot twice, once in the head and once in the side. The head wound is superficial, but he will likely have terrible headaches for several days. The side wound is more serious, but I believe I got all the bullet fragments out. He will need to be kept still and the wounds checked regularly for infection." "You a nurse?" Billy asked. He was younger, perhaps 20, with features that spoke of Chinese ancestry. "No, but I have some experience with medical care. Mr. Jamison told me he was ambushed by 3 men who wanted his land." Hank's expression darkened. "That would be the Dockery brothers. They have been trying to force the boss to sell for months now. Guess they decided to take more direct action." "Should we send for the law?" Eleanor asked. "Nearest law is in Oatman, 15 miles north. Not much help even when you can find them." Hank looked at her with curiosity. "Where were you heading when you found him?" "Anywhere, really. I am traveling from Kansas looking for a new start. My husband died 3 months ago and there was nothing left for me there." "Well, you are welcome to stay here while the boss recovers," Hank said. "We have got a spare room and we could use someone who knows how to tend injuries. We would pay you for your time." Eleanor looked down at Owen's unconscious form. She had nowhere particular to go, no specific destination in mind. A few weeks here would give her time to rest and replenish her supplies. And truthfully, she wanted to see this man recover. There was something about him, even in his current state, that intrigued her. "I will stay until he is well enough to care for himself," she said. The next 3 days passed in a blur of careful nursing. Owen drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid enough to drink water or broth, other times lost in fever dreams. Eleanor stayed by his bedside for most of that time, sleeping in a chair when exhaustion overwhelmed her. Hank and Billy took turns helping her, but the bulk of the work fell to her. On the 4th day, Owen's fever broke. Eleanor woke from an uneasy doze to find him watching her with clear, alert eyes. "You are still here," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "Where else would I be?" She replied, standing to check his forehead. "The fever was gone, thank God. How do you feel?" "Like I was shot twice and dragged behind a horse." He tried to sit up, and she pushed him firmly back down. "You will stay in that bed until I say otherwise, Mr. Jamison." Your wounds are healing well, but you are not recovered yet. How long have I been here? 4 days. You have been unconscious for most of it. Owen was quiet for a moment, his eyes studying her face. Hank told me what you did, removing the bullet, bringing me home. I owe you my life, Mrs. Eaton. You owe me nothing except your cooperation in recovering. Now, are you hungry? I can bring you some soup. Starving, he admitted. Over the next week, Eleanor watched Owen grow stronger each day. He was a difficult patient, constantly trying to get up before he was ready, but she proved equally stubborn in keeping him in bed. They talked during those long hours, sharing stories of their lives. Owen told her about growing up in this valley, how his father had claimed this land 20 years ago and built it into one of the most successful ranches in the territory. He spoke of his mother, who had died when he was 12, and of the responsibility he felt to maintain what his father had built. Eleanor, in turn, told him about Kansas, about her marriage at 19 to a man 15 years her senior, a farmer who had seemed kind and steady. She spoke carefully about those years, about learning that marriage was not always what romantic stories promised, about the isolation of farm life and the grinding poverty that had defined her existence. Her husband had been a good man in his way, but there had been no passion, no deep connection between them. His death had brought grief, but also a strange sense of relief and the opportunity for a new beginning. So you just packed up and headed west? Owen asked, propped up on pillows now, looking more like himself each day. What else was there to do? The farm was mortgaged beyond redemption. I sold what I could, took what would fit in a wagon, and left. Eleanor was changing his bandages as she spoke, pleased to see the wounds healing cleanly. I thought I might go to California or perhaps Oregon, somewhere I could start fresh. What would you do there? I have no idea, she admitted with a small smile. I can sew, cook, tend to the sick. I am educated enough to teach children if necessary. Something would present itself. Owen was quiet, watching her work with an intensity that made her self-conscious. You could stay here, he said finally. Eleanor's hands stilled. Mr. Jamison, I cannot simply stay at your ranch indefinitely. It would not be proper. I am not suggesting anything improper. I need a housekeeper, someone to cook, keep the place clean. Hank and Billy and I have been living like bachelors, and it shows. The pay would be fair and you would have your own quarters. It was a practical offer, and Eleanor found herself considering it. She had grown fond of this valley over the past week and a half. There was something about the wide sky and the distant mountains that spoke to something in her soul. And Owen himself was far more interesting than she wanted to admit. Let me think about it, she said. That evening, she walked out beyond the ranch buildings, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. The valley stretched out before her, and she could see what Owen meant about owning it. His cattle grazed across thousands of acres, and she had learned from Hank that the ranch was prosperous, providing beef to army forts and mining towns throughout the territory. Beautiful, is it not? She turned to find Owen approaching, walking slowly but steadily. You should not be out of bed, she scolded. I have been in bed for over a week. I needed to move. He came to stand beside her, and she noticed he still favored his wounded side. I meant what I said earlier about you staying. Why? Eleanor asked bluntly. You know nothing about me except that I happened to find you and had enough medical knowledge to keep you alive. I know you are competent, practical, and brave. You could have left me to die. Instead, you risked your own safety to help me. That tells me plenty about your character. Or it tells you I am foolish. You are not foolish. Owen's voice was quiet but certain. Will you stay, at least for a few months, until you decide where you want to go? Eleanor looked out at the valley again, at the land Owen Jamison owned, the land she had been crossing when she found him. Perhaps this was where she was meant to be, at least for now. "Very well," she said. "I will stay." The next 3 months passed quickly. Eleanor settled into the rhythm of ranch life, discovering she had a talent for organization and management. The house had indeed been in a bachelor state of disorder, but under her care, it became a comfortable home. She cooked meals that the men praised enthusiastically after months of their own crude attempts. She mended clothes, kept the accounts, and even helped with some of the lighter ranch work. Owen recovered fully, returning to the demanding work of running the ranch. Eleanor watched him ride out each morning with Hank and Billy, watched him return each evening tired but satisfied. He was a good employer, she learned, fair and hardworking. His men respected him, and the ranch prospered under his management. The Dockery brothers had not made another appearance, but Owen remained watchful. He taught Eleanor to shoot, spending patient hours helping her improve her aim. She proved an apt student, and by the end of the first month she could hit targets with reasonable accuracy. "Why do you need me to learn this?" she asked one afternoon as they practiced behind the barn. "Because I need to know you can defend yourself if those men come back while I am away from the house," Owen said seriously. "They are dangerous, Eleanor. I will not have you helpless if they return." The use of her first name had become natural between them over the weeks. She called him Owen now, not Mr. Jamison, and they had fallen into an easy friendship that Eleanor valued more than she wanted to admit. But it was more than friendship, she was beginning to realize. She looked forward to his return each evening, found herself listening for his step, watching for his smile. The way he looked at her sometimes made her heart race in a way her husband's gaze never had. She was falling in love with Owen Jamison, and she suspected he felt something similar. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. Eleanor had been married before, but she had never been in love. What she felt for Owen was entirely different from the mild affection she had had for her husband. This was consuming, overwhelming, a feeling that grew stronger each day. One evening in late September, Owen asked her to walk with him after dinner. They strolled away from the house as the sun set, and Eleanor waited for him to speak, sensing he had something important to say. "I need to tell you something," Owen began, his voice hesitant in a way that was unlike him. "About why those men want my land. All right. There is copper on this land. A significant deposit, according to the surveys my father had done before he died. It is worth a fortune, Eleanor. Enough to make this one of the richest ranches in the territory, maybe in the whole Southwest." Eleanor absorbed this information. "And the Dockery brothers know about this, they suspect. My father kept it quiet and I have done the same, but somehow word has leaked out. They have been trying to buy the land for months, offering more and more money. When I kept refusing, they decided to try force." "Why are you telling me this?" Owen stopped walking and turned to face her. "Because I am going to ask you something, and I want you to know the full truth before I do. I do not want you thinking later that I kept things from you." Eleanor's heart began to pound. "What are you going to ask me, marry me?" The words hung in the air between them. Eleanor stared at him, her mind racing. "Eleanor, I know this is sudden," Owen continued quickly. "I know you have only been here 3 months and you are still in mourning for your husband, but I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. You are brave and strong and kind. You make this house a home. You make me want to be a better man. I am in love with you and I hope you might feel something for me too." "Owen," Eleanor whispered, her voice shaking. "If you need time, I understand. If you want to say no, I will accept that. But I had to tell you, had to ask. Will you marry me, Eleanor?" She looked up at his face, at the hope and vulnerability in his eyes. Everything in her wanted to say yes, but fear held her back. "I care for you," she said slowly. More than I have ever cared for anyone, but Owen, I was married for 3 years and it was not always easy. I learned that marriage can be complicated, difficult. I do not want to make another mistake. This would not be a mistake. Owen took her hands in his grip warm and strong. I cannot promise that marriage to me will be easy. Life out here is hard and there are dangers. But I can promise that I will love you, respect you, and do everything in my power to make you happy. That is all I can offer, but I offer it freely. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. This was what she had wanted without knowing it, what she had hoped for in those dark Kansas nights. A man who truly loved her, who saw her as an equal partner, not just a housekeeper and nurse. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Owen's face broke into a brilliant smile. He pulled her close, and Eleanor went willingly into his arms. When he kissed her, it was nothing like the perfunctory kisses her first husband had given her. This kiss was full of passion and promise, and Eleanor felt herself responding with equal fervor. They were married 3 weeks later in Oatman, in a simple ceremony at the small church there. Hank and Billy served as witnesses, both grinning broadly throughout the proceedings. Eleanor wore a new dress she had sewn herself, pale blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. Owen wore his best suit, and Eleanor thought she had never seen a handsomer man. The wedding night was a revelation. Eleanor had approached it with some trepidation, her previous experience having been more duty than pleasure. But Owen was patient and gentle, taking time to make sure she was comfortable, that she wanted what was happening between them. The passion that had been building between them for months finally found its expression. And Eleanor discovered that physical intimacy could be beautiful when shared with someone you truly loved. The next morning, Eleanor woke in Owen's arms, feeling truly happy for the first time in years. He was still asleep, his face peaceful in the early light, and she took a moment to study him. This was her husband now, this strong, good man who owned the valley she had been crossing when fate brought them together. Life settled into a new pattern. Eleanor was no longer the housekeeper but the lady of the ranch, though she still did much of the same work. The difference was in how she felt about it. This was her home now, truly hers, and she took pride in everything she did. Winter came to the valley, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. Eleanor and Owen spent the long evenings by the fire, talking and planning for the future. Owen wanted to start developing the copper deposits in the spring, bringing in miners and equipment. Eleanor helped him with the planning, her organized mind proving invaluable as they worked through the logistics. In January, the Dockery brothers returned. Eleanor was alone in the house when she heard riders approaching. She looked out to see 3 men, and recognition sent a chill through her. These must be the men who had ambushed Owen. She grabbed the rifle Owen had taught her to use and positioned herself by the window. "Mrs. Jamison," one of them called, "we know you are in there. We just want to talk." "My husband is not here," Eleanor called back, proud that her voice did not shake. "You will have to come back another time. It is you we want to talk to. We have a business proposition." "I am not interested in anything you have to say. Leave now or I will shoot." One of the men laughed. "A woman with a rifle. That is rich. Now, why do not you come out here and listen to what we have to say? We can make you a rich woman, richer than Owen Jamison ever could." Eleanor's answer was to fire a shot that sent dirt flying up right in front of the lead rider's horse. The animal reared and the man cursed, fighting to keep his seat. "The next shot will not be a warning," Eleanor said coldly. "Leave my land. Now." The men exchanged glances. "You are making a mistake," one of them said. "This valley is going to change hands one way or another. Better to do it peaceful-like. This valley belongs to my husband and it will remain his. I will not tell you again. Leave." They left, but Eleanor knew this was not over. She watched them ride away, then carefully locked all the doors and windows. When Owen returned an hour later with Hank and Billy, she told him what had happened. Owen's face was grim as he listened. "I should not have left you alone. I was fine. I sent them away. This time. But they will come back, Eleanor, and next time they might not be so easily deterred." He pulled her close. "I will not lose you, not to them or anyone else." "Then we need to take action," Eleanor said firmly. "We need to go to the law, make an official complaint. Even if the nearest marshal is in Oatman, we need to establish a record of their threats." Owen nodded slowly. "You are right. We will go tomorrow, all of us. I will not leave you here alone again until this is settled." The trip to Oatman took most of the day. The town was small but growing, serving the ranches and mines scattered throughout the territory. The marshal, a tired-looking man named Tom Garrett, listened to their story with an expression that suggested he had heard similar tales before. "I will look into it," he said finally. "But unless they do something more than make threats, there is not much I can do. This territory is big and I am just one man." "They shot me," Owen pointed out. "Is attempted murder not enough? Can you prove it was them? Did you see their faces?" Owen had to admit he had not gotten a clear look at his attackers. Marshal Garrett spread his hands in a gesture of helplessness. "I believe you, Mr. Jamison, but belief is not proof. Keep me informed if they try anything else, and I will do what I can." It was not the answer they had hoped for, but it was what they had expected. On the ride back to the ranch, Eleanor was quiet, thinking. "We need to hire more men," she said finally. "If the law cannot help us, we need to be able to defend the ranch ourselves." "Hiring men costs money," Owen said. "We have money, and we are going to have more once we start mining the copper. Use some of it now to make sure we are still alive and in control of this land to enjoy those future profits." Owen looked at her with admiration. "When did you become such a businesswoman?" "I have always been practical. You are just now noticing." They hired 3 more men over the next month, all with good references and experience in both ranch work and handling trouble. The ranch took on a more fortified feeling, with men always on watch, rifles always close at hand. February brought warmer weather and the beginning of preparations for the copper mining operation. Owen had contacted a mining company in Tucson, and they sent representatives to survey the land and assess the deposit. The news was good. The copper was high quality and extensive. Full-scale mining operations could begin by summer. Eleanor watched the activity with mixed feelings. She loved this valley as it was, wild and open. The thought of it being torn up by mining operations saddened her, even as she understood the financial necessity and opportunity. "We will be careful," Owen assured her one evening. "We will mine only what we need and restore the land as much as possible afterward. This valley will still be beautiful. I know. I just hope the money is worth the changes it will bring. The money will give us security. It will let us expand the ranch, hire more people, build a real legacy, maybe even start a family." Eleanor felt her heart skip. They had not yet spoken directly about children, though it was always an unspoken hope. "A family," she repeated softly. "Is that something you want?" Owen asked, taking her hand. "Yes, very much." He kissed her gently. "Then we will have one. A whole house full of children if you want." March brought the return of the Dockery brothers, but this time they were not alone. They arrived with a dozen men, all armed, all looking ready for trouble. Owen was in the north pasture when they came, but Eleanor saw them from the house and immediately sent Billy riding to fetch him. She and the hired hands gathered in front of the house, weapons ready. The lead Dockery, a big man with a scarred face, rode forward. "We are done playing games," he announced. "This valley is going to be ours. You can sell it to us for a fair price and leave peaceful, or we can take it by force. Your choice." "This land is not for sale," Eleanor said clearly. "Not now, not ever. You are trespassing. Leave immediately." "Or what? You going to shoot all of us, if necessary?" The standoff stretched out, tension building. Eleanor's hands were steady on her rifle, but her heart was pounding. There were more of them, and if shooting started, people were going to die. Then she heard hoofbeats from the north, and Owen appeared with Hank and the other ranch hands, all armed. The numbers were now more even. Owen rode straight up to the Dockery brothers, his face hard as stone. "You have threatened my wife for the last time. This land is mine, and it will stay mine. If you do not turn around right now and leave, there is going to be bloodshed, and I guarantee you will not like how it turns out. Big talk from a man we already shot once. You shot me in the back in an ambush. Face to face is different, and you know it." Owen's hand rested on his gun. "Make your choice. Ride away now, or we settle this here and now." For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the lead Dockery raised his hand in a gesture that might have been surrender or might have been a signal. "We will go," he said. "But this is not over, Jamison. That copper is too valuable. One way or another, we will have this land. Try again, and you will end up in the ground," Owen said flatly. The Dockery brothers and their men rode away, but everyone knew this was only a temporary reprieve. That night, Owen called a meeting of all the ranch hands. "We cannot keep living like this," he said. "Always waiting for the next attack. We need to end this one way or another." "What are you proposing?" Hank asked. "I am going to make them an offer. Not for the land, but for a partnership in the copper mining. They get a percentage of the profits in exchange for leaving the ranch alone." Eleanor shook her head. "Owen, you cannot reward them for threatening us." "I am not rewarding them. I am being practical. Fighting them could cost lives, maybe yours or mine. The copper deposit is big enough that sharing the profits still leaves us wealthy. Is pride worth dying for?" Put that way, Eleanor had to concede the point. "Very well. But make sure the terms are clear and legally binding. I will not have them finding loopholes to cheat us later." The negotiations took place in Oatman, with Marshal Garrett serving as witness. The Dockery brothers were suspicious at first, certain it was a trick, but when Owen laid out the actual terms with numbers and percentages, they began to listen. In the end, they agreed. The Dockeries would receive 20% of the copper mining profits in exchange for a signed agreement leaving the ranch and Owen's family alone. The papers were drawn up by a lawyer, signed by all parties, and filed with the territorial government. It was not the victory Eleanor would have preferred, but it was peace, and that was worth something. Spring arrived in the valley with wildflowers blooming across the grasslands. Eleanor discovered she was pregnant in April, and Owen's joy was so profound it brought tears to her eyes. He became even more protective than before, insisting she rest more, not work too hard. "I am having a baby, not dying of consumption," she protested. "I am perfectly capable of continuing my normal activities." "I know, but let me worry about you anyway." "You are the most important person in my world, Eleanor. You and this child." The mining operation began in earnest that summer. A small town sprang up near the copper deposit, housing the miners and their families. Owen was careful to maintain good relations with the workers, paying fair wages and ensuring safe conditions. The copper was extracted and shipped to smelters in Tucson, and the money began flowing in exactly as predicted. True to his word, the Dockery brothers received their percentage and they kept their distance. Eleanor occasionally saw them in Oatman when she went to town, and there was always tension in those encounters, but no more threats, no more violence. Eleanor's pregnancy progressed smoothly. She continued to manage the household, though Owen and the hands took on more of the physical work. In the evenings, she and Owen would sit together, his hand on her swelling belly, feeling the baby kick. "What do you want?" Owen asked one night. "A boy or a girl? Healthy," Eleanor said firmly. "That is all I care about, me too. But if I had to choose, I think I would like a son first, someone to eventually take over the ranch. And if it is a girl, then she will learn to run a ranch. I do not care if it goes against convention. Any child of ours will be raised to be strong and capable, regardless of whether they are a boy or girl." Eleanor loved him more in that moment than she thought possible. Her first husband would never have said such a thing, would have insisted on traditional roles and expectations. Owen saw her as an equal partner, and he would raise their children with the same values. The baby came in early December, arriving 3 weeks before expected. Eleanor's labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Owen, pacing outside the bedroom where the midwife worked, feared he might lose them both. But Eleanor was strong, and when he finally heard the baby's cry, the relief nearly brought him to his knees. "A boy," the midwife announced, bringing the baby out wrapped in blankets. Healthy and loud. Owen held his son for the first time, marveling at the tiny fingers and the shock of dark hair. The baby had his mother's eyes, he thought, though the midwife said all babies had blue eyes at first. Eleanor was exhausted but smiling when he brought the baby to her. "What should we name him?" she asked. "I was thinking James, after my father, James Owen Jamison." "Jamie," Eleanor said softly, touching the baby's cheek. "Hello, little Jamie." The next year passed in a blur of new parenthood and continued ranch expansion. Jamie grew from a tiny infant into a sturdy baby, crawling and then walking. Eleanor discovered she loved being a mother, though it was more exhausting than she had anticipated. Owen was an involved father, taking time each day to play with his son, even when ranch work demanded his attention. The copper mining continued to be profitable. The town near the mine, which they had named Copper Springs, had grown to nearly 200 people. Owen had built a school and a church there, wanting to create a real community, not just a temporary mining camp. In the spring of 1886, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. The baby, another boy they named Henry, arrived in January of 1887, just over a year after Jamie's birth. "We are going to need a bigger house," Owen joked as he held his second son. "We are going to need more help," Eleanor countered. 2 babies are more than twice as much work as one. They hired a young woman from Copper Springs to help with the children and the housework. Her name was Sarah, and she was excellent with babies, patient and gentle. With her assistance, Eleanor was able to return to some of her management duties for the ranch. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch prospered, the copper mine continued to produce wealth, and the Dockery brothers kept to their agreement. Occasionally, Eleanor would think back to that day when she had found Owen bleeding in the scrub grass, how close he had come to death, how easily she might have passed him by or been unable to save him. "What are you thinking about?" Owen asked one evening. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sun set over the valley while the boys slept inside. "How strange fate is. If I had taken a different route through the valley, if I had been an hour earlier or later, we never would have met." "I think we would have found each other somehow," Owen said, taking her hand. "Some things are meant to be. Do you really believe that?" "I believe that you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Whether that was fate or chance, I am grateful for it every day." Eleanor leaned against him, feeling his solid warmth, the steady beat of his heart. "I am grateful, too, for all of this. The ranch, our children, you. I never imagined I could be this happy." "We have built something good here," Owen said. "A real home, a real family. Everything I own, everything I have worked for, It is all sweeter because I share it with you." In 1888, Eleanor gave birth to their first daughter, whom they named Catherine. She had her mother's blonde hair and her father's gray eyes, and both Owen and Eleanor were instantly smitten. Jamie, now 3, was fascinated by his baby sister, while 2-year-old Henry was more interested in his toys. The addition of a daughter seemed to complete their family. The house, which Owen had indeed expanded to include more bedrooms, was full of noise and life. Eleanor had never been happier, though she was also perpetually exhausted from managing 3 small children, a large household, and her continuing role in running the ranch. In the summer of that year, Owen made a decision that surprised Eleanor. He wanted to sell his share of the copper mine. "Not all of it," he explained when she questioned him, "but enough to give us the capital to expand the cattle operation significantly. The copper will eventually run out, but good grazing land is forever." "What about the Dockery brothers?" Eleanor asked. "They can buy out my portion if they want, or we find other investors. Either way, I want to diversify. Too much of our wealth is tied up in one resource." It was sound thinking, and Eleanor agreed. The negotiations took several months, but in the end, the Dockery brothers bought most of Owen's share of the mine, making them majority owners. Owen kept a small percentage to maintain some income from the operation, but the bulk of his capital was now freed up for other investments. He used the money to buy additional land, expanding the ranch from 5,000 acres to nearly 10,000. More cattle were purchased, more hands hired. The ranch, which had been successful before, became one of the largest operations in the territory. In 1890, Arizona was still a territory, but there was increasing talk of statehood. Owen had become involved in local politics, serving on the territorial council and advocating for policies that would benefit ranchers and settlers. Eleanor supported his political work, though it meant more time apart. That fall, she was pregnant again, and this time the pregnancy was difficult from the start. She was often sick and exhausted, and the baby seemed to drain her strength in a way the previous 3 had not. Owen wanted to send for a doctor from Tucson, but Eleanor refused, insisting she would be fine. The baby came early in February of 1891, a month before expected. It was another boy, but he was small and weak, and Eleanor herself was in poor condition after the birth. For 3 days, both mother and baby fought for their lives while Owen prayed harder than he ever had before. By the grace of God or luck or Eleanor's own stubborn will, both survived. The baby, whom they named Thomas, grew stronger each day, and Eleanor slowly recovered her strength. But the experience left Owen shaken in a way he had not been even when shot. "No more children," he said firmly once Eleanor was out of danger. "I will not risk losing you. Owen, I am fine. You nearly died. Thomas nearly died. I am serious, Eleanor. Our family is complete. 4 children are more than enough." Eleanor, who had also been frightened by how difficult this pregnancy had been, did not argue. 4 children were indeed enough, and she had no desire to go through such an ordeal again. The 1890s brought continued prosperity and growth. The ranch flourished under Owen's management and Eleanor's organizational skills. The children grew healthy and strong. Jamie showed an early aptitude for ranch work, following his father everywhere. Henry was quieter, more interested in books and learning. Catherine was bold and fearless, a combination of both parents. Little Thomas, the baby who had struggled so hard to live, proved to be the most determined of them all. In 1896, the copper mine played out, exactly as Owen had predicted. The Dockery brothers found themselves with a worthless property and debts they could not pay. They came to Owen, asking to buy back into the cattle ranch, but he refused. "You made your choice when you bought me out," he said without sympathy. "I advised you to diversify, but you wanted all the copper profits for yourselves. That is not my problem." The Dockery brothers left Arizona shortly after, their fortune lost. Eleanor felt a small measure of satisfaction at their downfall, though she tried not to be vindictive. The turn of the century found the Jamison family thriving. Jamie, now 15, was already taking on significant responsibility for the ranch. Henry, at 13, had announced his intention to become a lawyer, which both pleased and surprised his parents. Catherine, at 12, could outride most of the ranch hands and was showing an interest in the business side of the operation. Thomas, the youngest at 9, was still finding his way but showed signs of his siblings' intelligence and determination. Eleanor, now 39, looked at what she and Owen had built and marveled. The scared widow who had been traveling through this valley 17 years ago, who had found a wounded stranger and nursed him back to health, would never have imagined this life. A husband she loved deeply, 4 wonderful children, a prosperous ranch, respect in the community, and a sense of purpose and belonging she had never known before. "What are you thinking about?" Owen asked, coming to stand beside her on the porch. It was a question he had asked countless times over the years, and she never tired of it. Everything. How far we have come. Owen, now 42, put his arm around her waist. His hair was starting to gray at the temples, and there were lines around his eyes from years of squinting at the horizon, but to Eleanor, he was as handsome as the day she had first seen him. "We have had a good life," he said. "We have. And it is not over yet. No, not by a long shot." Owen looked out at the valley, the land he owned, the land Eleanor had been crossing when their paths intersected. "Sometimes I still cannot believe you stopped that day, that you did not just ride past me. I could never have done that. It was not in me to leave someone suffering. I know. It is one of the many things I love about you." He turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "I never properly thanked you, for saving my life that day." "Owen, you have thanked me 1,000 times over the years. Not properly, not the way I mean." He took both her hands in his. "You saved my life, Eleanor, but more than that, you gave me a life worth living. Before you, this ranch was just work, just responsibility. You made it a home. You gave me a family, a purpose beyond just maintaining what my father built. Everything good in my life, everything I value came from you. So thank you. Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for being brave enough to help a stranger. Thank you for agreeing to stay, for marrying me, for building this life with me. Thank you for being you." Eleanor felt tears welling in her eyes. After 17 years of marriage, Owen could still move her to tears with his words. "You are welcome," she said softly. "And thank you for asking me to stay, for loving me, for giving me a home and a family and a purpose. I was so lost when I came here, Owen. I did not know who I was or what I wanted from life. You helped me find that." They stood together in the fading light, holding each other, thinking about the years behind and the years ahead. Inside the house, they could hear their children's voices, arguing about something inconsequential. The ranch stretched out around them, 10,000 acres of valley and grassland and possibility. In 1903, Jamie married a girl from Oatman, a rancher's daughter named Margaret. The wedding was large and joyous, with people coming from all over the territory to celebrate. Eleanor watched her firstborn say his vows and remembered her own wedding day, the simple ceremony that had changed everything. "We are getting old," she whispered to Owen as they danced at the reception. "Speak for yourself." "I am in my prime," he replied with a grin that made him look 20 years younger. "You are 45. "Exactly. Prime." Eleanor laughed and let him spin her around the floor, They were not old, not really. There were still plenty of good years ahead. In 1904, Henry left for law school in California. His departure left a hole in the household, but Eleanor was proud of him for pursuing his dreams. Not every family could afford to send a son to university, but the ranch's prosperity made it possible. Catherine, now 16, had become Eleanor's right hand in managing the household and the ranch's business affairs. She was sharp and clever, with a head for numbers that impressed even the most hardened businessmen. Eleanor knew her daughter would do great things, whatever path she chose. Thomas, at 13, had finally found his passion in horses. He had a natural gift for training and breeding, and Owen had given him increasing responsibility for the ranch's horse program. In 1907, Eleanor turned 46 and Owen 50. Their silver wedding anniversary was celebrated with a party that lasted 2 days. Friends and neighbors came from across the territory, many telling stories of how Owen and Eleanor had helped them over the years, lending money during hard times, providing employment, supporting community projects. "We have made a difference here," Eleanor said to Owen as they finally went to bed on the second night, exhausted but happy. "We have, together." "Always together," Eleanor agreed. In 1910, Catherine married a mining engineer who had come to Copper Springs to assess new mineral deposits. Eleanor initially worried that her strong-willed daughter would never find a man who could match her, but Daniel proved to be perfect for her, respecting her intelligence and ambition. Thomas, now 19, had taken over complete management of the horse breeding program and was making a name for himself throughout the territory. Buyers came from as far as Texas and California to purchase Jamison horses. Henry returned from law school in 1911, now a qualified attorney. Instead of staying in California, he came home to Arizona, setting up practice in Oatman. He specialized in land and water rights, issues critical to ranchers and farmers, and quickly built a successful practice. In 1912, Arizona finally achieved statehood. Owen, who had been involved in the movement for years, attended the celebration in Phoenix as one of the honored guests. Eleanor went with him, and they watched as the new state flag was raised for the first time. "Your father would be proud," Eleanor said, squeezing Owen's hand. "To see what you have built, what you have helped create." "Our father would be proud," Owen corrected. "He would be proud of our whole family." The years continued to pass, marked by grandchildren and continued prosperity. Jamie and Margaret had 4 children. Catherine and Daniel had 3. Even Henry, the confirmed bachelor, eventually married and had 2 children. Eleanor threw herself into being a grandmother with the same energy she had brought to everything else in her life. The ranch house was always full of children, noise, and laughter. She taught her granddaughters to sew and shoot, her grandsons to cook and keep accounts. Owen spent hours telling them stories of the old days, of building the ranch, of fighting off claim jumpers and surviving droughts. In 1920, Owen turned 63 and Eleanor was 59. They were grandparents 12 times over, with another grandchild on the way. The ranch had passed mostly into Jamie's hands now, though Owen still rode out most days to check on things. Eleanor had slowed down a bit, her joints sometimes aching, but her mind was as sharp as ever. One evening in the spring of that year, they sat together on the porch as they had done countless times before. The sun was setting over the valley, painting everything gold. "You ever regret it?" Owen asked suddenly. "Stopping that day, staying here instead of going on to California or Oregon," Eleanor looked at him in surprise. "Never, not for a single moment. This valley, this ranch, you, our children and grandchildren, this is everything I ever wanted. I just did not know I wanted it until I found it. I think about it sometimes, Owen said. How easily things could have been different if you had been a few miles north or south, if you had decided not to stop, if I had died before you found me. So many things had to align perfectly for us to have this life. Then I am grateful they did align. I am grateful for every moment, every memory, the good times and the hard times, all of it. Owen reached over and took her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. I love you, Eleanor Jamison. I have loved you from that first day when you bossed me around and refused to let me die. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Eleanor replied, tears in her eyes. Always. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the house, they could hear their grandchildren playing, their voices high and sweet. The ranch was quiet around them, cattle settling for the night, horses whickering softly in the barn. This was home. This valley that Owen owned, that Eleanor had been crossing all those years ago, had become her entire world. And what a world it was, full of love and family and purpose. In 1924, Owen fell ill with pneumonia. Despite the best efforts of doctors brought from as far as Phoenix, he did not recover. He died peacefully in his sleep one night in early November, with Eleanor holding his hand. Eleanor was 63 when she became a widow for the second time, but the grief was entirely different from what she had felt at her first husband's death. Owen had been the love of her life, her partner in every sense, and his loss left a hole that could never be filled. But she did not break. She had their children, their grandchildren, the ranch they had built together. She had 41 years of memories, of love shared and challenges overcome. That was more than many people got in a lifetime. Jamie ran the ranch now, with help from Thomas and advice from Henry. Eleanor remained involved but let her sons take the lead. She spent her days with her grandchildren, passing on stories of their grandfather, of the early days of the ranch, of building a life in this wild valley. Eleanor Jamison lived another 8 years after Owen's death, dying peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1932 at the age of 71. She was laid to rest beside Owen on a hill overlooking the valley, a spot they had chosen together years before. The ranch continued to prosper under Jamie's management and eventually passed to his sons. The Jamison name became synonymous with quality cattle and horses throughout Arizona and beyond. Copper Springs grew into a real town, and the church and school Owen had built remained at its heart. But more than the material legacy, Owen and Eleanor left behind a family bound by love and strengthened by the values they had instilled. Their children and grandchildren told stories of how Eleanor had found Owen wounded and dying, how she had nursed him back to health, how they had fallen in love and built something lasting in this harsh land. It was a love story that had started with an act of compassion in a lonely valley, a woman helping a stranger when she could have ridden past. It had grown into a partnership that transformed not just 2 lives but an entire community. And it endured long after both of them were gone, in the children and grandchildren who carried their blood and their values into the future. The valley remained beautiful, just as Owen had promised. The cattle still grazed across thousands of acres. The mountains still rose against the sky. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set and painted everything gold, it was easy to imagine Owen and Eleanor still there, sitting on their porch, holding hands, looking out at the land they had loved and the life they had built together. Their story was one of chance and choice, of risk and reward, of 2 people finding each other when they needed it most and building something that would last for generations. It was a story of the Wild West, of hard work and determination, but most of all it was a love story, pure and simple. And those who remembered them understood that everything else, all the success and prosperity and legacy, had grown from that one fundamental truth. Owen Jamison had owned the valley Eleanor Eaton had been crossing that fateful day. But in the end, what mattered was not the land or the wealth, or even the family they created. What mattered was the love they shared, the partnership they forged, the way they had chosen each other and kept choosing each other every day for more than 4 decades. That was their true legacy, and it was written not just in deeds and property records, but in the hearts of everyone who knew them and heard their story. A wounded stranger and the woman who saved him, who became lovers, partners, parents, grandparents, and in the end, legends in their own right, their names forever linked with this valley and with each other. And if love could be measured not in words or gestures, but in the life built from it, then theirs was a love that filled a valley, spanned generations, and endured beyond death itself. A testament to what two people could create when they opened their hearts to possibility, and had the courage to build a life together in the untamed beauty of the American frontier.